Alrighty, guys, welcome back to Satsventure. Joey here. Today we have Brendan Gentili on the show, someone who hosts his own Bitcoin podcast show on YouTube where he interviews some of the biggest Bitcoiners across the world, names such as Lawrence Lepard, Jeff Booth, and our own Aussie legend, Zane Truscott. Looking forward to speaking to you, man. How you going?
Yeah, it's great to see you, Joey. This is it's been a while trying to get this done. It's always when I'm scheduling stuff, you're scheduling stuff, it makes it a little tougher. So I'm glad we were able to make it done.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny talking to people across the world because the time zones are just crazy. So I appreciate you getting on and making this work. For my first question today, I've got, what did your life look like before Bitcoin and how has that changed?
Boy, that's a great question, and it's a loaded question. I grew up playing hockey my entire life, and I have a theory that we have a lot of problems in the world today because men don't get punched in the face enough, and that means literally and figuratively. We have life is very easy for a lot of people in the Western world, at least, and we are unsure. We're treading new waters, so to speak, with a lot of Western men of what accountability and responsibility looks like, and literally and figuratively, people don't get punched in the face anymore. I mean, I'm 38 years old. I grew up playing hockey. Grew up getting in lots of fights, on the ice rink, and then we wrestle with buddies, growing up, and you dust yourself off, and then you start playing again, or whatever. And nowadays, it's someone looks at you cross-eyed, and there's something wrong. There's some big to do. It's some issue going on, and someone looked at me weird. I had someone I know, I won't say who it is, someone I know almost got in a fight inside of a fast food restaurant before because they were like someone's driving through the drive-through and they were trying to wave them, give them an eye, like, okay, you can go. And then the guy came and confronted that person, was like, hey, did you look at me? Were you looking at me weird? And the guy was like, no, I was just like, hey, you can go, you can go pass through. I mean, that's the point of society we've got to. And then you fast forward, and that was like 5-10 years ago. You fast forward that all the way to today, and what we've witnessed just in the last couple of weeks here in America, and it's only going to get worse. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but social unrest will continue. The way Bitcoin's changed me was, again, playing hockey my entire life, and realizing, being very political, and realizing while I was able to play hockey and played it at high levels, I had a lot of time on my hands outside of the rink. So I was able to study politics, history. I was a history buff, military buff, wanted to be in the military, wanted to be a Navy SEAL or a fighter pilot my whole life. And I loved playing hockey a little bit more, I guess. I was really good at it. So that took precedent, and I never ended up doing those other things. And you saw the '08 crash. I was graduating, university, college at that time, right when that was happening, and you realize that there was one team. These guys were all on the same team. We're really, no matter where you are around the world, especially the Western world, all these parties are one and the same, and they're just, it's it's the fake prison of two ideas. Like, there's two competing ideas, apparently, and that's anything but the truth. So Bitcoin woke me up to that. I was very political, and while I was playing hockey and arguing with anyone I could, arguing with teammates and debate them, and professors and teachers growing up, and other adults, and then you realize that those people didn't even have the answers because they were fighting a game they didn't even understand, and most of those people didn't even know history. So how can I, just for here in America, most of those people didn't even read the Constitution. Most people in America have never even read the Constitution before, or the Bill of Rights. So how can you argue with someone who doesn't have any contextual background of what's going on in your own country? And so I stopped doing that around 2009 to 2012, somewhere in there, basically, and realized there's the game being played, reading Preacher of Jekyll Island, all these different books about the rabbit hole you go down of money, and how money's corrupted, and how money is used to control human beings for centuries and millennia. And it's just the song, same dance, story as old as time, and going all the way back to the Bible. And all of recorded history shows us that money is constantly corrupted. It's used to control humans. So at the end of the day, as I was leaving hockey and starting to get hurt, retiring from hockey in 2012, it became very evident that I was leaving politics at that point to go and really work on myself and personal development, personal growth. And it took me a few more years after learning gold and silver and what real money was, and that paper dollars were claim checks and their IOUs on the real money. Started my own business, started my own real estate team once I got done playing hockey, started investing in real estate, buying gold and silver, things of that nature. And then a few years later, it led me to Bitcoin. And so studying, and I was already very receptive to Bitcoin, obviously, because of all the background I just told you, right? Like all these, you've seen history repeating itself over and over again, reading The Sovereign Individual, 20 years ago, all these books that really showed you the roadmap. And then, so the pattern clicked very easily for me in 2016, 17, 18, when I found Bitcoin, and really started and really grokked it. Again, how does it change me? It's completely changed my outlook on life, because you think everything's political, and you realize that politics is just this base layer, or I don't know how people want to look at it, but it's just this layer of where most people sit, and they have people fighting red versus blue, so to speak, and distracting you from what's really going on, which is the money layer that is the real layer that's people are controlling you with. But then there is another layer to that, which is good versus evil spirits, because the good versus evil spirits are fighting 24/7, 365 all the time. That's what controls the money printers and the money changers. And then the money changers are what control the politicians, which is, again, where most people reside, so in most of humanity. So to me, it's just being very obvious, like I have great hope because I have a pretty good understanding of the system. But when you look around, you get sad because you see a lot of people that don't have hope, for whatever reason. They don't have hope in the system they're in. They don't have hope because the expenses are getting away from them all the time, every single day. They have too much month at the end of their money. And so they're constantly behind, and they're getting angrier and angrier. They're they feel like a caged animal. And so you have empathy for people because you have this cure. You have a cure for economic cancer. You have an answer. The thing that transcends politics, the money that transcends, gold and silver, all previous forms of money, quote unquote, we've had before. And that's not even getting into the mining aspects and like the actual physical developments of mining and how it can help cure the earth and stop pollution and like all these different things that the mining itself can do. But just there's so many aspects to Bitcoin, and it's helped me realize that truthfully, 95 to 99% of people want the same thing. And Bitcoin's helped me really realize, because I was very political 20 years ago, that I have a lot of friends in Bitcoin now that they started on the other end of the spectrum, the political spectrum, or I think it's more of a circle. So they're very far away, opposite sides of the circle. Because the farther you go around, you just come back to, we're all one and the same, actually. So it's not like some spectrum like line, like the further you get away from each other, like the further you are actually. So that's, again, in my opinion, that's another fallacy that people have, where it's like you get further away, but you don't. It's all one circle. And so I realized that everyone was going for the same thing. Most people wanted freedom. Most people wanted to be left alone. Most people wanted these things, but they just were unsure, or maybe they were led astray on how to get there, or they were told a lot of false things, which goes back to obviously the propaganda, which is enabled by the money printers, right? The money printers, if you have control of the printing press, then you can endlessly feed the mechanism, the beast. You can have government run compulsory schools. You can have media. You can have sports with things in the end zone in American football. You can have all these propaganda slogans and all these things fed by the currency printer, which is paid for in large part by inflation and people on the machine, on the rat wheel. So all that to be said, that's kind of like a really quick synopsis of 20 years of my life to a degree, but also how things have changed for me. And when you really see the veil, the scales falling from your eyes, you see the wizard behind the curtain. It's a wild world that we live in. But we know that. We should know that. And I think the thing that's hardest for most people to understand, because I hear it all the time, is I just can't believe people are that evil. I can't believe people would want to do things like that. And it's not that people are evil per se. They're incepted by evil. People are all created good. And I can prove that just by the very fact that there's not, a million mass shootings every single day in life, right? Like there alone should show you and prove to you that people are inherently good, because that's a possibility. Like that could happen, but it doesn't. It doesn't happen. So there's so many ways to prove to people that, hey, humans are generally good. We have the bad actors here and there that are incepted. We're all cracked vessels, and we can be incepted by evil. And we all have that choice every single day to make good or bad decisions. But we're inherently good, and people do dumb things. People feel trapped. People feel like there's no way out. So that leads people to doing worse and worse things. So at the end of the day, again, that's what's changed me and made me realize that there are answers to not everything in life, but there are answers to a lot of the things that we thrust upon ourselves. And I think that's the thing that gives me great hope at the end of the day. Obviously, Christ, like the end all be all, but at the end of the day, like what can we do here on earth? He gives us free will. So what are we going to do with that free will? What are we going to do with these talents and abilities? Well, let's use the tools that he's bestowed upon all of us to make this world a better place. and Bitcoin, in my opinion, being the best thing to reorganize and reorient society.
Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to get in there. Like, as I've been listening to you, there's so many questions I want to ask. But just initially, like, I'm only 21, so I've never really experienced the world in the sense of being able to try and start a business and go down these rabbit holes of like, how can I guess, make the most money sort of thing. So, how can you leave something like real estate where a lot of people argue it can generate cash flow and you can, suddenly get access to these, mortgages that other people can't, and potentially raise enough fiat to buy more Bitcoin than someone that can't do these things? So, what are some hidden things about real estate that you could maybe express now where it can open the eyes of a lot of people that don't understand how it actually might not be the best strategy right now, and rather Bitcoin is sort of something people should have their eyes focused on?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's funny because I always joke that real estate is it's the last thing in the water, we'll say, on the Titanic, right? It's like the Titanic. The Titanic's going down, and the dollar is the Titanic. It's the reserve currency. It's the thing that everyone thinks can't go down. It's unsinkable, and it's the real estate is the last thing in the water. So it's, in the bow or the stern of the ship, it's going down last and goes into the water last. So people think like, oh, it's so amazing. Number one, they think like the dollar can't go down, and it's, we've got aircraft carriers, guys, and we've got all these other things. And again, Jim Rogers always would say that, the greatest lesson of history is that most people don't learn history. So I feel very fortunate, again, just being my life, just growing up with just happened to be, I was studying a lot of these things for a long time, and what led me to real estate and history. So a lot of things made sense, kind of right away almost. And so real estate is that thing where they get you with cash flow, they get you with dividends, they get you with, all these things that you can make. And those are, for lack of a better phrase, for shock value, I guess, and maybe a better way to say it is, those things are just propaganda tools, in essence, to get people to stay in the system. Those are just financial games that people play, in essence, to incentivize people to stay in that system, for lack of a better phrase. Now, some persons might hear that and be like, what in the literal hell are you talking about, bud? But again, that's 10,000 plus hours of me studying this, being in real estate, reading hundreds and hundreds of books. So how do I give the knowledge that's in my head to someone else that's only studied this for 1 hour of their life or 10 hours of their life, right? It's impossible. So a lot of things I say are shock value, because I'm not like my job. Like Robert Kiyosaki is one of my biggest mentors. That's who I 15 years ago found, right when I was leaving school and everything. And he always, he's the biggest, personal finance book of all time, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and one of the best-selling authors, in essence, of all time. And, he's like, I'm a moron. He's like, I don't know anything. I mean, he's joking. He's basically, he's a shock doctor to a degree. He's mastered the art of marketing. And he's like, the point is, I don't have to be an expert in real estate. I need a team. Business is a team sport. And I have people around me that are smarter than me. I'm a generalist, like entrepreneurs are generalists. They are visionaries. They see the future, and they put teams of people together to solve problems and create solutions for humanity. And that's what Robert Kiyosaki is and was. And I'm nowhere near that level. You look at like the Charlie Kirks of the world, or Robert Kiyosaki, or some of these great entrepreneurs, Steve Jobs, things like that, right? You go down this list of names. These guys were incredible business people, actually had unbelievable organizations, hence why they're known, that they're so well known, or they were so well known, is because they are great business people and great visionaries, and people see that mission and want to be led by those people because they can see the future. And I believe that's inside everyone, but for whatever reason, some people just suppress it more than others. They have different upbringings, different opportunities, whatever it is. They're born in a different place in the world, so they didn't, and that's life. That's what makes life great, is everyone brings something different to the table. So again, I'm painting this whole picture in the sense of, a lot of what I say is to shock people out of the system, because you can't teach someone 10,000 hours in 1 hour podcast, right? So it's like, you have to shake people up. And Kiyosaki would always say, like, my job is to shift your context. My job is not to tell you how to lease a rental property. If you want that, and then go talk to Susie on the corner who runs a property management company. My job is to get you thinking and shift the context of your brain, of your mind, and get you thinking outside the box, break you out of the compulsory school system that 99% of society has gone through, at least in the Western world, where you're just taught by the state, and they call it public schools, or they call it, whatever, but it's government run education. It's what the state wants you to know, and nothing more, nothing less. And so that right there, again, should shock someone. That should wake someone up to, oh my goodness, 50% of each country, in essence, should be like, whoa, that's insane. Like, I don't want that. And that's why there's a massive homeschooling movement in the world right now. Obviously, 2020 was a big factor in that too, but people are waking up to the fact that we have a million ways to learn, get better, and grow. And so my job is to try to shock people out of their comfort zone and shock people out of their way of thinking. And real estate is one of those things, again, that it was when we just had fiat, it was the best thing you could do, really. I mean, with the tax advantages there are and things like that. But what I realized over the years was that no one's going to do this. I was doing it for 10 years and almost no one did it. I mean, I'd have people invest with me. I'd raise money, use other people's money, which is, if you can do it, great, I guess. You can raise money and go through all that and make a return. You can do that, and you could have an infinite return. If you can invest with other people's money and then return all that capital back to them and have the property at the end of the day and do all that, then you have an infinite return. That beats Bitcoin every single day, all day, twice on Sunday. So an infinite return is much better than a 60%, CAGR, yearly return or whatever. So, but again, that's not easy. The whole point is, what I realized is that this is great for Brandon. Like, this is wonderful, but what happens to the rest of society? And you could see for 20, 25 years, I could see society shifting. The Overton window kept moving, and in many inflection points along that way, like we talked about, '08, the '09 Obamacare here in America, all these different inflection points where we just kept going off the rails, further away from freedom and liberty and sovereignty, individual sovereignty, and more towards collective control, collective groupthink, and more towards one-size-fits-all solutions, which is the antithesis. That's the opposite of how America was founded. What made America great? That's why America is, or was exceptional, is because of the thought of individual governance, Constitution, Bill of Rights. It's not like, oh, the grass is greener over here. That's not why America is exceptional. It's because of the really letting people do what they do best, which is think, grow, be creative. And government was very limited here for a long time, so it restricted government, which is the point. And then humans were allowed to flourish. So real estate is for the average person, again, it's almost impossible. Again, you can't even afford a regular house. You really can't afford rental properties or apartment complexes. Those returns really just aren't there. Things have been papered over so much through the printing that the big part of it, Joey, honestly, was just, again, like seeing the average person, and like, we'll call it the wealth gap to a degree, but you're always going to have a wealth gap no matter what. But it was, hey, how can you bring the poor and the middle class up further or closer to where the wealthy are? The wealthy are going to be wealthy because they think differently. They do different things. They have different skills. They're determined. They're motivated. They have some different opportunities because they're determined, because they're motivated, because they're shaking hands, kissing babies, because they're going out and putting the effort in. Again, some people are born in the right place, right time, and that's life. That's never going to change. But real estate was one of those things that, again, it's the big thing is those buzzwords are what get people sucked in. And they're doing those things because they're trying to outrun inflation. They're trying to outrun the currency printer, and money is there to store your time and energy. It's, there's a couple different definitions of money to a degree. Like Jack Mahler's, and I always have to paraphrase. I always kind of forget how he says it, but it's, the most saleable, most saleable or non-saleable good, the best non-saleable good. I can't remember exactly how he said it. I always forget it, but it's also a container for your time and energy. So it's something you store your time and energy in. It's finite time we have in a finite container is Bitcoin. That's also what money is, but it's also a ledger. It's a global ledger for noting who has what and who owes what in essence. So it's multiple things. There's one I'm forgetting in there too, but there's 3 or 4 definitions of money that I think are the ultimate definitions or different characteristics of money in essence. And so real estate is great for a couple of guys at the top that really get it, have the know-how, but it's dang near impossible for the average person for many reasons, and then you need experience, you need resources, you need time in order to do it. So the average person should be able to go to McDonald's, go to a fast food restaurant, go to the local market, and they should be able to work there, make 2 Bitcoin a year, save 1 Bitcoin a year, so save more than they spend each year. And then there's a doctor that makes 10 Bitcoin a year, but he saves 0 Bitcoin a year. Finish the riddle. Who's ahead in 10 years? If the guy or gal who's working at the corner store has 10 Bitcoin, 1 a year they save for 10 years, and the doctor keeps spending everything he has for 10 years, who has more Bitcoin at the end of 10 years? That's how money should work, but it doesn't work like that. We have money that you can't save in, and we have currency. So what do people do? Again, kind of coming full circle, they go out into bonds, they go out into real estate, they go out into all these things to try to get a return to justify the existence of their cash going away. The very act of you selling your dollars for another asset, for real estate or something like that, is you saying, I don't believe in my currency. It sucks. It can't save my time and energy, which is its only real not its only function. We said it's got a couple, like the ledger, it stores your time and energy, but its main purpose really is to store your time and energy. It can't even do that. So I have to sell it and buy another asset with it. That's insanity. And that's where, they justify it with, well, we got to spur the economy. We got to do all the, all these shenanigans. And also you mix that with, none of us have grown up with a deflationary world, or like a deflationary money, a neutral money that captures deflation. We've all grown up the frog in the boiling pot, and that's all we know. So how do you tell a fish he's wet if he's grown up in the water his whole life? How do you tell someone that their money is fake, that their money is really currency, or that what they've been doing is the economy, everything is a pseudoscience? Well, again, how do you send someone 10,000 hours of knowledge and pack it into their brain in an hour podcast? You can't. It starts with one thing. It's watching this show, or it's watching one of your other episodes, and then starting down the rabbit hole, like how you and I started. This is how, I've watched literally 10,000 hours, probably just a podcast alone, or listened to them over the last 15 years, 20 years. And then you pack on the books and all these different things. So it comes from inside. It's in here. It's in the heart. It's in the mind of how do we get outside that realm. So again, it's, real estate is amazing. I love real estate. I will say, I love real estate. It's amazing, and there is something to it. It has utility, obviously. People need to live somewhere. And so it always will be a thing. You're always going to have real estate. I think at the end of the day, though, what I believe, and I think what many of us believe here in the Bitcoin world, is that Bitcoin will account for all of the dollars in the world. So dollars may not exist at some point, whether it's 5 years from now or 50 years from now or 500 years from now. Bitcoin will account for all the dollars that are in the world, and the system will transition to Bitcoin. So your apartments will be, whatever, 0.1 Bitcoin, or your apartment, 350 unit apartment complex will be 1 Bitcoin, or your, whatever it is, that business you buy on the corner will be, 0.01 Bitcoin. And so that's going to be the transition, which is kind of easy to see. It's not hard to see how, if dollars don't exist, it's this pretty easy switch, guys. This is a new protocol outside of the system. And I think that's another important note before I wrap this long-winded answer, but it's a protocol outside of the system we're in. People think it's a reserve asset, or it's an asset, and it's like, no, because that, you got to be careful, because that's an asset inside the same system. Then that's what people mean when they say that. It's a protocol. It's a new protocol outside, completely off. It's the Titanic is sinking and the dollar is sinking. People are starting to figure out the ship's listing, and then you got some early adopters and early people that are, the people that are in Bitcoin now, and they're jumping on lifeboats. And then you got a lot of society looking at them like, what are these guys doing? Like, these guys are nuts. It's the middle of the night, and it's dark, and it's cold, and they're jumping on lifeboats, and the ship's fine. And they told us it's not going to sink. That's where we're at in the game right now. So we still have a couple hours till the boat sinks, but it's time to find your spot on the life raft and make sure your family's in there, because it's going to get faster, right? It's like an iceberg flipping. It's going to get faster when it gets toward the end. It gets quicker and quicker and quicker until it's gone. And real estate is that the last thing that's in, because it's the most juiced up, best tax advantage thing and whatever. But you're still inside the system. No matter what you do, you will be at the end, or you'll be at the bottom of the ocean, 12,000 feet under at the end of the day. Doesn't matter. You might just go in last, but you'll still be there.
Yeah, I love what Jeff Booth commented on this. Like he said, everyone's so anti-capitalism now. And so they just think, the system's rigged against us or whatever. And he sort of mentions how we're actually in like a crony capitalist society, which I didn't even understand what that was. But just reading like a definition, it basically is a society based on a relationship between businesses and governments, where those involved receive a financial advantage compared to, say, the general public. And so the idea of capitalism is not actually a bad idea, but it doesn't work when we're not in a free market. And so I love, the way he goes into that sort of thing, and how we basically should be living in deflation rather than inflation. And they're just constantly feeding the system of dollars and not allowing for prices to come down. And so I suppose that wealth gap is just going to continue to get further and further without something like Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin to me is just the only neutral thing I can put my money into where I don't feel I'm ripping someone off. And so could you maybe deep dive into how fiat and Bitcoin sort of mirror that parable where it's like you build your house on sand and you build your house on the rock from the Bible? Because I really like that idea where it's like, could you maybe explain how Bitcoin differs from, say, the key characteristics of fiat dollars, which would be money is meant to be scarce, divisible, transportable, acceptable, fungible, and durable. How has fiat dollars failed as money?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something I talk about a lot. It's one of my favorite passages from the Bible when it comes to money, and then you mentioned the free market also. So there's a couple things here. So I look at and I try to explain people, people have a hard time with capitalism right now because they conflate the two. They conflate inflation and capitalism and all these things together, when in reality, like you said, they're different things. The monetary layer is the foundation you build your economy on, you build society on top of. So people like, oh, capitalism, and like I've had really smart people, financial people, I mean finance majors, from university, and be like, well, inflation is a part of capitalism, you can't have deflation. And it's like, yes, that's true. In the system we're in, you can't have deflation long term. And like you can have deflation, but you can't have it long term. It's not good for society because it'll blow up at some point, because we're in an inflationary debt-based system. But the key to the world and living in the world, just in general, not even in this time period, but always, is holding opposing opinions in your head at the same time. That's one of my definitions of genius, is you have to be able to know that more than one answer is true. This is not government-run compulsory school where there's a Scantron, there's a multiple choice test where it's like, hey, pick the one answer, pick the right answer. Life has hundreds and hundreds of correct answers. And that's generally, most of life, right? If it's math, maybe there's one answer or something like that, right? But this is the layer that you build society on is so incredibly important. And the reason we have so many issues with capitalism is because we built it on sand. We built it on fiat, which doesn't have the qualities of sound money, to your point. The biggest one being a store of value. And the best way you can describe it is that, again, your time is finite. And so what other asset on earth? I've never had anyone be able to tell me something else that's purely, perfectly finite. The only thing I've ever found in my life is Bitcoin. That's perfectly finite. There's only 21 million, not to go through all the qualities and properties of Bitcoin, but for the average person, that's like, well, how do you know that's the case? And well, again, that takes some study. There's the miners that mine, secure and harden the network. There's the nodes that uphold the protocol and the rules of the network. Like all these things all go into it. And there's a reason that so much capital over the last 16 years has been flowing into Bitcoin, because the more that education increases and the more you start understanding it and looking at all your objections, your questions, and you start answering them and realizing, okay, what about this? Okay, well, that works. Okay, what about that? And then that works. You start realizing, holy cow, we might have truly found something just like the wheel, just like fire, this new protocol that's outside the system that humans have never had before. The first time humans have ever had money. Like really, we're not going to say perfect money. It's just the first time humans have ever had money. Because even gold and silver, thousands of years, was the best thing we had because it had such a small inflation rate, but it still has an inflation rate at the end of the day. So the inflation rate is obviously people are either printing the currency, or if it's gold and silver, people are mining more of it, right? If the price goes up or the value, people are looking for more of it. So they go try to mine more. So then when people go mine more, there's gold and silver are very plentiful in the world, the earth or the solar system, the universe. So people are incentivized to go mine more of it and go find more in the world. So then that brings prices back into equilibrium. That's economics, 101. All economics is just supply and demand. People, we make it very hard and abstract so that the way the average person doesn't understand what's going on, but it's supply and demand. So it'll balance itself out, a true free market. With Bitcoin, there's 21 million. So the value just continually accrues to Bitcoin, and the purchasing power continues to go up over time as more and more people feed the network. Like Metcalfe's law, obviously the value of the network is the number of users squared. And so that's how Bitcoin continues to build on itself, and it can't be stolen from someone. There's no inflation rate. It's a finite asset, the only one I know of, perfectly matched to your finite time on earth. We all have a finite time. We are here. So what would you trade for your finite time? Well, I would only trade a finite asset for it. I wouldn't trade my finite time for an infinite piece of paper that some goon just prints in the basement somewhere. Some goon just prints at the Treasury or the Fed. That's insanity. So that's the trade that most people are making, and then they wonder why they continually get poorer every single month. And this has gone on for decades and decades and centuries and millennia, and the average person just doesn't understand why. Well, now we have an answer that routes around that. Gold and silver hasn't worked for thousands of years. It was the best thing we have, but it continually gets centralized into vaults or banks or whatever, and then they issue more claim checks, more fake paper IOUs, and there's bank runs, and then people lose. There's a transfer of wealth to those who understood the game, and then a bunch of people lose, and then the cycle repeats, and we just keep starting over again. Well, I mean, I'm sick of that. I think you're sick of that. Like, there's a lot of us that are sick of that, and there's a way out around that now. Satoshi discovered this protocol, put all the technologies together to create a protocol that routes around all of that. It's an end run around the system. So the building on a monetary layer of rock is the most important thing. Is the best thing, like you said earlier. It's the best thing you can do. It's literally the most moral thing you can do in the world right now is defund the corrupt system we're in by selling your fake government political currency units, dollars, yen, lira, pesos, and then taking that and transferring or transitioning that to Bitcoin or swapping that for Bitcoin and then saving on Bitcoin. And that system that's being built is light years beyond obviously what fiat is. And that's why people in the Bitcoin world that are living out of Bitcoin Standard continue to get wealthier. The value continues to accrue to them, which is, we know, like you said with Jeff Booth, that all the free market is deflationary. Therefore, prices are always coming down. So you have to ask yourself, if the prices are always coming down, or the free market is deflationary, then why are some prices coming down, but most prices are going up? Well, those are in conflict with each other. How can you have a world where the free market is deflationary, meaning the prices come down, but a lot of the prices go up? That's because there's currency printing, massive currency printing that's papering over all that and making everything more expensive. So those things are in conflict with each other and have to resolve themselves. And that's Bitcoin accounting for this entire system. Bitcoin continues, it had no price, and then it had 1 cent as a price, and then $1, then 100, and 1,000. Now it's got $100,000 to buy one Bitcoin. That'll hit 1 million. Then it will be 10 million. Then it will be 100 million. At some point, it just flies out of control in essence, and people just transfer to the new system, and the old currencies collapse, whether it's the dollar or whatever it is. At some point, it goes no bid. People say, I'm not accepting toilet paper, dollars for Bitcoin. So at some point, society wakes up when we get to 1%, 2%, 3%. I always have the 3% number, just a biblical number. That kind of like the American Revolution was around 3%, where the people actually got up and fought the American Revolution. And we're like, I'm sick of this. I'm done. We're not doing this anymore. So to me, in my belief, it's around 3% of the world has to really get to that and be a Bitcoiner and understand and say, no more, and with the fiat currencies. And so that's why people have this weird outlook on capitalism. You can't have, if we're in a debt-based system, inflationary system, and there's no capital in the system, there's no equity, how can you have capitalism? There's no capital in the system. So there's no capitalism. Like that's, again, these things, when you break it down their component parts, it becomes very comedic. It becomes very comical that we even think these things, but they're just tropes we've been told by mainstream news, legacy news, by government-run schools for so long that people just haven't questioned them. Quite simply, they just haven't questioned things. So when you build on sand, fiat currencies that are printed into oblivion, and they have a lot of the properties of sound money. They just don't have the most important one, which is a store of value. Because now you have to trust someone to not print it and devalue your time and energy and steal it from you. Well, as Satoshi said, that trust has been breached over and over and over again throughout life. And at what point does the humans wake up and say, why am I doing this? Why am I okay being in slavery and having this stolen from me all the time? It's insanity. It's literally doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of insanity, right? So that time's over. People are waking up to it. It takes time. Just because truth is true, it doesn't mean people just wake up to it overnight. Unfortunately, that's what all of us have to learn. That's what Bitcoiners have to learn. That's what new Bitcoiners have to learn. People, you don't just come to it overnight. It still is a transition period. And then we have events like these social events the last couple of weeks. We have 2020 happened. We had 2008 that happened. And people start, those are quantum leaps. So like you have just everyday education, like what's going on, what we're doing here. And then we have quantum leaps you stack. So you have everyday education and then quantum leaps with fear and greed. And then the price goes up. So you have like these fear events where people run to Bitcoin, wars, whatever. Then you have greed events where the price goes up and people jump in. Then you have daily education in between those quantum leap events that kind of just build the basis of people and just kind of slowly over time build the educational level of Bitcoiners and harden people to the network, and then they never leave. And that just keeps happening every single day. I mean, the mining, everything, the hashing power, everything is growing. It's been growing and growing and growing every single day. And so when you look at the fundamentals of Bitcoin, they've never been stronger, they've never been greater, and it's becoming obvious. I mean, it's only been 16 years since the networks existed. When you think about how fast it's been truly of a rise, we have so far to go. It's only a $2 trillion asset, and we still have a 1 quadrillion in assets to account for. So that's another, 500x from here that we have to account for in purchasing power that Bitcoin has to go up. And again, it's holding two opposing opinions in your head at the same time. Like we're accounting for it in today's dollars, but dollars won't exist at some point. Remember, like at some point it'll transition to, hey, it's Bitcoin's worth $1 million or it's worth $10 million. Oh, you know what? People are saying a cheeseburger is worth 100 sats. Like it'll just start transitioning. Like people start denominating things. Again, not like overnight, but like over time, you'll just start seeing like your buddies start saying it, like you start saying it, right? Like you start talking a little differently. That's the process happening and playing out. And then eventually the dollar is just, it's not a thing. And again, it could be 100 years from now, 50 years from now, or whatever, but I think it's going to happen faster than people think, just because I look at 10 or 20 years from now, just because the younger generations aren't going to put up with it anymore. The younger generations want transparency, and there's anything but transparency in politics and the legacy systems now. And so once that demographic shifts, the older generations are sunsetted, and then the younger generations take over. It's going to be a massive, that's the real flippening. So we want to talk about real flippening. That's going to be the real flippening, is those demographics shifting.
Yeah, I think like, although I'm young and things, but I watched like 2016. I remember arguing with people about Trump and things like that, even at that age. And then as time's gone on, then it was Joe Biden and so forth. But it's really clicked to me after, I guess, Trump's last win was, oh man, this is bigger than a party. Like this is, I realized they're really trying to strip money from the hands of the state. And so I was always arguing and under the impression that if this person won or whatever, this party won, then they could turn the ship around, sort of thing. But now I've learned, especially through the whole Doge movement, that they can't turn the ship around. Like Elon Musk is blatantly saying to people, oh, I realized I can't fix the government. Like they have to print, they have to continue to run a deficit. They're so just in so much debt, like $37 trillion of debt or whatever it is. And like, that's a crazy idea. Like if the government was a business, it's not doing very good. Like it's just living in credit. And so it's borrowing the future, bringing it forward, and sort of living in the future in some sense. So the idea of removing money from the state might be something that can link to our next question. How has Bitcoin opened your eyes to not only the education system for your kids, but also the quality of food?
Yeah, I mean, greatly. Because again, you remember, or you realize that the money is what's controlling everything. Kind of like we've been talking about this whole time, obviously. And what I touched on in the beginning, what's really changed me is the money. Follow the money. And Nolan Bowerly talks about this for years. Following the science is completely broken, because if you don't understand the money changers, and how the incentives of the society work, when you have a fiat system, you're incentivized. Consumers and producers are on the wrong side. They're on the opposite sides of the table. And so we have an inflationary fiat currency. The prices are continuing because there's someone messing with the currency. Now the prices are all out of whack and out of kilter. So you have consumers, they're pricing things, their costs are going up. So then they're trying to outprice and move price up. And then the consumers are like, well, I can't pay for this anymore. And then they have to start making choices. And then the consumers say, well, you know what, since we're not paying as much, I'm just going to put worse ingredients in the food, and that will keep it the same price, but you're just going to eat a bunch of toxic stuff instead. And they're incentivized not to tell the people, because then they won't get paid by those consumers, and then they won't be able to make rent that month. They won't be able to feed their family. So like you can just see like the negative effects. And again, fiat at the end of the day is like an oil spill 10 miles up the river at the very top of a mountain, and it's just pouring oil into this river and contaminating everything. And everyone down the river is like looking at it like, oh man, we got to get some nets down here and like try to clean all this up. And when instead they could just go up the river and figure out what's at the epicenter of the problem and the crux and the core of it, and just turn off the faucet, fix that, and like, oh, okay, that just healed everything downstream. Well, that's the society we've been in and we're in. We have constantly like Doge, Elon coming in trying to, we need more FDA rules. RFK is going to come and help things. Like, well, yeah, great, like maybe, but probably not. Like you can't do that. Like I was asked before, like, well, you're so down on like Trump and like what, this new administration, like whatever, like what would have to happen in order for him to be successful? I'm like, well, to be totally honest, I mean, the only thing that even gives him a chance to being successful is if he came in first day or first 100 days in essence and just cut 95% of the government, and you had 3 million people, federal workers gone. But it's impossible because, like you said, I mean, you'd have civil war because you'd have 3 million people out of work. You'd have a bunch of people who aren't even related to them, don't even know what's going on. They just hate Donald Trump. And this goes for both sides. Like, this doesn't matter who it is. This could have been opposite. It could have been like Biden doing it, and then whoa, what is this guy doing? Like, this is insane. It doesn't matter. And so, like, we saw this with Elon, the greatest example. You can't, Elon's a brilliant guy. I don't know what side of the road the guy's actually on though, like what team he's really on. I think Elon's on Elon's team. He just does whatever. And so that's a whole different rabbit hole for a different day. But, he's going in there and again, he seemingly doesn't understand how money works. He's a brilliant dude, rocket scientist, etc., but he doesn't understand money. And so if you don't understand the history of money and how money works, then you're going to have a hard time. It's going to be very difficult because you're going in thinking, I was going to cut a bunch of stuff and this is great. But then you got to think about it. We've federalized, and we've consolidated so much power in the federal government, like we were talking about earlier, that the average person, really in the Western world, especially in America, obviously, is on the government dole in some way, shape, or fashion. That majority of people. So when you have someone cut in and say, "Hey, I'm going to do something responsible and cut things, austerity, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to balance a budget." Well, then you have 50, 60, 70% of the country that's on some form of, again, I'll use American terms like Social Security, Medicare, all these different entitlement programs. And they feel an affront to their livelihood because it is. It's actually an affront to their livelihood because they've either paid into the system, Social Security, or it's Medicare or Medicaid. We're redistributing wealth from these people and moving it over to these people that need it, or whatever it is. So you have this world where government is God and daddy. And so you have the people, vast majority of the country, and again, a lot of the Western world, basically all the Western world, it's an affront to me. You are an affront to myself. And this is something that, again, I was woken up to. I didn't understand this 20 years ago, probably when I was about your age, 15 years old, 20 years old, arguing with people. I just thought it was as simple as balance of budgets, be common sense, Constitution, Bill of Rights. And you can do that. Now, if theoretically you could, like we said, Trump, Elon could come in and just wipe out 3 million federal workers, cut 95% of the government. You could say, hey, Bitcoin's legal tender. We're not using the dollar anymore. That is obviously an option. But you would start probably a world war. It'd probably be a civil war. Like there'd be a bunch, basically the world would be at war at that point because things would just collapse. Like the whole system would collapse in and of itself. And I think when you're a young kid, like I was, you're just like, yeah, so what? We got to take our medicine. Like that's how I thought. It was just like, well, we did stupid things, play stupid games, you get stupid rewards. At the end of the day, it's, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I know the answer we're going to choose. The answer we're going to choose is, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, is financial repression. The IMF paper in 2012, Ben Bernanke talked about in 2002. We can't have deflation in the system like we talked about. In this system, in a fiat, debt-based, legacy monetary system we're in, you can't have long-term deflation because it cripples the economy. So they will continue to print currency ad nauseum until all the currencies hyperinflate and they're gone. And again, anyone's guess when that happens. But to your point, $37 trillion, $38 trillion here in America. It was like $8 trillion just like 10 years ago or whatever, 10, 12, 15 years ago. And it is exponentially increasing, and it has to exponentially increase. And so this is where, like, trying to tie this all together, I was the kid who thought we're going to balance these things. But I learned from gold and silver guys, actually, like Mike Maloney, Robert Kiyosaki, that the game is inflate or die. I mean, and so the game you have to play is buy, borrow, die. So buying assets, borrowing against them, and then riding that out, and dying with your assets and pass it down to your children. Because at some point, this system does revert and fix itself, and it won't matter. So like those debts get wiped out, whatever, and use intelligent leverage and be very smart about what you're doing. And that takes intelligence. So I'm not advocating someone to specifically do it or a specific person to do it. But I grew up using debt and doing these things. So like you have to learn, which is, there's infinite amount of knowledge out here to learn and how to do these things. But to your point earlier, all you have to do is create value for society, save in Bitcoin, save in an asset that doesn't steal from you. That's finite compared to your finite time. This is the same thing, finite for finite. And you will continue to get ahead in the world, because we know, as Max Kaiser says, Bitcoin is guaranteed to go up forever because it's opposite. It's inverse of the currencies, right? The government currencies. They have to exponentially get more debt to keep this system solvent, to outprint all the deflation and the technological gains. AI. I mean, think of how fast things are going to speed up now going forward, and just massive currency printing that will be needed. So what do we therefore know? If A plus B equals C, we know from first principle thinking that if these things happen, then Bitcoin is guaranteed has to go up, because it is finite. So it's the only finite asset. So more people will be educated. More people will see this pod, your pod, other pods, and they will see it, get educated, looking for an answer, looking because they're hurting and saying, oh my gosh, this is an answer. I have to humble myself to the fact that Joey was right. Brandon was right. These people were right. And I didn't want to listen initially. We all go through this. I mean, like, we've all done this. So it's not like we all have to go through the gauntlet together, or at different times, I should say, but we all come through the same door. and have to humble ourselves and realize everything I've been told in my life is a lie. History, what's the saying? History is faker than the news. And all these things are a pseudoscience. We've created these pseudosciences that only happen in fiat fake worlds. You look at like their emperor Diocletian, who had the Edict of Prices, had like tried to price every single nano thing in the Roman Empire prior 2,000 years ago, what was it, 1,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago, and he tried to print, well, I'm going to kill you if you don't charge this thing, if you don't go into business what your family is doing. And so the whole thing crumbled in on itself because you have people trying to do price controls and, melt the coins down and coin clip and do all these shenanigans that we know always end in the same thing: bloodshed, tears, war, transfers of wealth from the people who see the game and can position themselves properly going forward into the future. So that's the biggest thing. So again, like I said, I mentioned the food part, all that. But again, as a viewer can hopefully see, the entire system, you can see how infected the system is when you can't have good fruit from a bad tree. It's probably the best saying, from the Bible as well. You can't have good fruit from a bad tree. So that explains the food, that explains the oil flowing down the river, have to hit the source. Like, you've got to fix the source, the roots, the crux of the issue, or else all this is moot. Elon doing this Doge stuff, all this stuff is completely moot. It's so far down the stream that it's impossible. You have to change the money and change how society is looking at money, or else it doesn't matter. It's all political shenanigans and funny games, and then people just trying to get power and get ahead of other people. It's all shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, and we know where the Titanic's going, right? 12,000 feet under.
Yeah, I think the Bible really does teach, you need to have like an equal measurement, like unit of measurement. And I think Bitcoin is the closest thing we have to that. I think everything else, if you try and measure in dollars or something, how can you measure in something that's constantly changing? It's like a ruler that you're trying to measure with that's just like, oh, one day it's this and one day it's that. And I think gold really exposes this. I think a lot of older people have seen the gold supply potentially double in their lifetime, but its price continues to get all-time highs. And you start to wonder why that is. And it's just because the dollars are just losing their value at a rate that's just ridiculous. Like, if gold was $35 an ounce, 1971, and now it's pushing all these new all-time highs that are like in the thousands, I think that's an awesome way to measure, hey, like the dollars are cooked, like it's no good. And then you've got Bitcoin come in, and that's just almost then remeasuring gold. And so it's all these new measurements, and it's pretty obvious to me that Bitcoin seems to be the superior measurement. And sort of pivoting back to what we were talking about there, how can Bitcoin sort of help support people that might be sort of taking the quote unquote risk with, say, homeschooling, for example? You sort of need one parent at home. How can Bitcoin sort of be, I guess, not necessarily the safe haven, but rather a financial foundation to allow those things? As your purchasing power is going up over time, you might be able to actually have a parent at home while the other one is making some money moves. What's sort of your thoughts on Bitcoin in that sort of world?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an example of that. There's no better way to show someone, I guess, or tell someone than to show them, right? And I'm an example of that. We're an example of that, me and my wife, and we homeschool our children, and we have the ability to, because, she's an attorney, and we are able to, save in Bitcoin for a number of years. And again, this is, someone starts today, this could be the same thing 5 years from now for you, for 7 years from now, or for 10 years. Or it could be in a year. I mean, it just, like, the day you start going, saving in Bitcoin, your mind starts changing, and you give yourself more runway to do whatever it is. And for us, one of those things is homeschooling, which is, to me, one of the best things you can do for your children, which is to spend more time with them and teach them the things that are truly important, instead of them being in, side of 4 cinder block walls for 8 hours a day, the glorified daycare, because both parents have to work now, which they didn't have to for a long time on sound money. Now they have to, because they're forced out the risk curve to go try to keep up with the spiraling expenses. And the other thing too, that one of the biggest risks in the world, I'm going to tangent really quick and I'll come back to the homeschooling, but the freezing of bank accounts. We saw this, we're seeing this, we're going to see this more. We saw it 10, 12 years ago in Cyprus, and freezing of bank accounts, where you're seeing it in the European Union. This is going to happen more. It's probably going to happen in Australia. It's going to happen in America at certain points over the next 5 years, 10 years. We're going to have bail-ins. These things will happen, because history has shown us they will happen. If they can't happen, they will happen, because governments are going to fly out of control faster and faster, and they will be looking for everything in order to get their hands on something to pay off the debts that they're in. And again, they had these test runs with 2020, and there are a lot of people didn't do anything, right? Like, there wasn't that much pushback for a lot of, and we know that because we have documentation of them saying this to each other, like, wow, these lockdowns worked pretty well, actually, stuff like that. So they were even surprised how well they worked across the world. So that, again, should show you they're not scared. Governments, as the founding fathers in America said, government should be scared of its people. And we have anything but that nowadays. Governments are not scared at all of the people. And so we're getting back to that because people are waking up. And unfortunately, bad things have happened. And a lot of bad things have happened in the last number of years where people have started to wake up. So, freezing a bank account, if you're homeschooling and your bank account's frozen because you said something online or you looked at someone the wrong way trying to wave them through, and that guy happened to be the so-and-so at a bank or whatever, and they froze your account, because that's what they can do on a fiat system. Your brokerage account, your bank account, that can just be frozen. Or you're a trucker and you don't believe in putting something in your body that the government's forcing you to do, your employer, and you don't have Bitcoin, you don't have a sovereign account, a cold storage wallet that you and you only control, and you're tied to the fiat system, the fiat banking rails, and they can just shut it down at the flick of a switch, the press of a button, and there's nothing you can do. I mean, you're cut out of the system, your livelihood's gone. How do you feed yourself? How do you do anything? And so we've seen now, again, throughout the last 16 years, the only way to, because what happens is when you have the ability to be sovereign and you actually have custody of your assets, Bitcoin, you now are uncontrollable. And that's what power people don't like. They don't like when humans are uncontrollable and can't be controlled. But the insidious part is that it's not insidious, but I guess that's the shock word, I guess. But humans are inherently good. Coming back to the beginning of the conversation, we said humans are inherently good. So we don't need. I don't need a president. I don't need someone telling me what the rules are and the laws are every single day. That's not how humans work. I don't need that. And so again, there's a little bit of a talk for a different day. But getting into like, well, what's civilized society, Brandon? How come this won't work? So we can get into that in another episode. But if you are trying to homeschool and all of a sudden you've saved up and you're trying to do that, and then all of a sudden it's frozen. Well, how are you going to homeschool going forward? Now your kid has to go back to school because you're paying through property taxes, so it's free, or whatever it is. And so now you're forced back into this system that you've been trying to pull away from, or you have saved up enough. Like I said, with us, we've saved up and we have an ability to do that, and we're not running on the hamster wheel all the time. I'm blessed to be able to do this, to go on podcasts, and which is my dream, is my entire life, is to been able to have a living, make a living talking about freedom and talking about liberty. And as a kid and a teenager, and having notes that about starting, doing media and doing stuff about talking about freedom and liberty. And at the time, there's a lot of the founding fathers and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and it still is. But it's morphed into Bitcoin gives you property rights for 8 billion people around the world, where the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were good for 350 million people, or if you're on U.S. territory or an embassy somewhere around the world. But now we have that ability. 8 billion people, by owning Bitcoin, have that ability which is the most beautiful thing ever. And so we have this extenuation of that we've never had before. So the homeschooling part of that is massive, and by saving in Bitcoin, you then give yourself that runway to step off the hamster wheel. Because I've talked to a ton of people about this. Hey, I get it, Brandon. I would love to homeschool. I want to. How do I do that? Like, how can I do that? Like, I'm stuck in this situation, whatever it is. And, for everyone, the answer is, well, maybe you can't do it right now. I mean, it took us 2 years to be able to figure it out, just not financially, but I guess somewhat financially, but like logistics, right? Like logistically trying to figure out your job, things like that. So I think it takes a year or two or a couple of years just for people, generally most people, to figure out the homeschooling aspect, the logistics of it, and trying to figure out how you're going to do it, and your jobs and all these things, right? How you're going to homeschool, etc. And the Bitcoin part of that is important because of those two things: being able to save in order to continue getting ahead, and you can have one person get off the hamster wheel, and you are also outside that system where you can't be frozen. You cannot have the governments or brokerages freezing your assets, and you're completely locked out of the system and now thrust and forced back into said system. And the last point with all that, again, is why this is so important, is people in power do not want this. This is a really crazy part, actually. and again, you have to empathize. This is what's so important. You have to empathize with people in power, because most people in power think they're doing the right thing. Like, can you imagine someone saying, hey, like you can't control me. Like, I should be able to do whatever I want or have privacy to do whatever I want. Well, someone in power is going to naturally look at that and be like, well, you're doing nefarious things. I'm elected. I'm here to make sure that my people are safe. And so that's what most people, most of them do believe that. Most people in power believe that, and they take it seriously. Now, again, this goes back, coming full circle to the money incentives so far downstream, that you're incentivized by your donors, or you're incentivized by so-and-so. So it's such like a cloudy matrix that you can't see what is going on. You can't see it 3 feet in front of you. You think you're doing the right thing. It's not that people, again, are all inherently evil that are in government. They're not. I mean, vast majority of people are trying to do what they think is best. They're trying to police the right way. They're trying to do these things that they think are upholding the integrity of society. But it's built on a facade, like you mentioned earlier, the question about building on the right foundation. It's built on a house of cards on sand. So you've got this thing where like everyone's just operating in this world that's built on quicksand, on mud, and it's slowly collapsing into itself, and we're putting energy into the wrong system. So Bitcoin is incredibly important because of those two things. You can't be frozen out of the system, and you can continue to be out of the system and have to be able to homeschool, but you also can save enough so that way you can have 1 or 2 people be out of the system and in homeschooling. So those are, I think, are the biggest reasons why.
Yeah, I think I like what Jeff Booth says, where he says basically you want to spend more time in the new system, time to start leaving the old system. Don't continue just to dabble in the old system and then occasionally jump into the new system. He's like, just spend more time in the new system. And I think it's interesting because homeschooling and all these ideas that were considered crazy, like not even long ago, it's like they almost fit in the new system to me now, and it's all sort of coming clear. Like, I think COVID to me was one of those wake up calls where I was going, oh man, I really have no power like in this old system. Maybe it's time to look for something else. Like, I didn't know what it was, but I think Bitcoin sort of contributes to that. And so that is interesting that a lot of Bitcoiners are now very wary of their health, very wary of their diet, and also very wary of what their kids are learning at school. It really goes down this rabbit hole. I guess people use like personal development or whatever you want to call it, but it's just like an awakening in some sense. Yeah, I just think that's really cool and really interesting, and it's something that some family members of mine are thinking about with their kids as their kids are getting older. They're just like, I don't think I want to send my kid to school anymore. I think there's a lot more behind the scenes that we don't know about, and I think homeschooling might be the route for some of them. Just before we head out, because I've got to go to work soon, what is some advice you can give to Gen Z, my generation, in regards to Bitcoin and saving habits, but as well as just some life advice you've learned from your own journey?
That's a great question. Again, these are really good questions. Give more value to society than you take. Be a producer, not a consumer, and save. We have the ability to save now, and the basis of capitalism is capital. You need that, because then when you have capital stored up, then you can deploy it confidently and appropriately to the next venture, whatever it might be. And because we live in a system that is, built inverted, we are very haphazard. We're all over the place with our currency, our cash. We just let it fly right out of our pocket because it's just like, whatever, it's not worth anything. We inherently know subconsciously that's not worth anything anyway. And that's why people aren't careful with it. And so people get to have this fallacy of, well, if there's a neutral money that captures deflation, you won't want to spend it. Like, you'll just keep waiting and waiting, waiting. Well, it's like at the end of the day, you start realizing, well, no, because I need to spend to live. Like, I have to buy a house. I have to feed my family. And then when you start realizing, wait, I'm paying for these things, but then the remaining Bitcoin I do have, and hopefully you're still working, creating more value for society as well, you keep earning more Bitcoin. And then on top of that, the Bitcoin you still do have in savings continues to grow in purchasing power as well. So then you start realizing, whoa, this whole system was completely inverted and backwards and malignant. It was a terrible system. And I was just forced to be a consumer and just spend just because that was the only way the system wasn't going to have deflation and collapse in on itself. So again, it's a pseudoscience. It's a lie that we're living in right now. So, the younger generations, all they have to do is not become, this is why it's so important even to go back and even the real estate stuff we were talking about. You don't have to become a real estate expert. Like those things, you can do those things someday. Like in 10, 15, 20 years, when you've saved all this Bitcoin and you have unbelievable purchasing power and you can go buy a couple of apartment complexes or 20 homes or 100 homes because you saved all this Bitcoin for 20 years, then you can become a real estate expert. Then you can, because at that point, if we want to put numbers to it, at that point, the return on Bitcoin as this new protocol and people moving to it will probably be a lot less than it is now, 20 years from now. Like a lot of the world will probably have moved into it. So then it'll always be growing in purchasing power, but much slower than the next 20 years. So at that point, maybe it makes sense to go deploy, like we said, if the deflationary system or a neutral money, you're not going to never spend it. You would then have this capital that you saved up as Bitcoin. You would say, hey, where can I deploy this now to get and actually produce something of value to society, have a beautiful apartment complex or the corner store business I want to buy, providing some type of value for society, and maybe returns you 30% a year or 20% a year, and Bitcoin is only returning 10 or 15% a year or something like that. So it's like, hey, how can I get a better return? How can I now provide back to society? But you'll have that choice. You'll have that option if you just commit and discipline yourself to doing that. And the beautiful part is, it's a dumb investment. Bitcoin is the irony in all of it, because IQ is not how you become a Bitcoiner. You have to lower your ego and raise your humility. And it's a dumb investment in the sense of there's not a billion moving parts to it. You don't have to, jump through this hoop and jerry rig this thing over here and do that and arbitrage this. It's hey, set it and forget it. Just produce for your society, do what you need to do, and then save in Bitcoin. Study Bitcoin. That's where the hard work comes in, the study part, but you don't need to be 180 IQ. That's the beauty of Bitcoin. It's, hey, he who can humble himself, lower his ego, lower his or her ego, that's who benefits from Bitcoin. So that's why you have poor people and rich people grok Bitcoin, and that's why you have poor people and rich people that don't get Bitcoin, because it's just a humility test. So like if it was a smarts thing, you would have all the smart people in the world that would get Bitcoin, and then all the dumb people would not be in Bitcoin. But that's not the case, right? It's like we can prove it right there, because there's smart and not so smart people in Bitcoin, and there's smart and not smart people not in Bitcoin. So just discipline yourself, be humble, do the work, listen, learn, grow, and you'll be handsomely rewarded in the coming years. Those people, again, all throughout history have shown, if you position yourself properly and you see what's coming in the future and do your homework, you can, and again, proven through history, you can benefit from the gains, the transfer of wealth that are coming to those who root themselves in truth.
Awesome advice, man. A lot to ponder on from this conversation. Really, really, really appreciate you coming on, and looking forward to the next one. And thanks for joining us, and I hope everyone enjoyed. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you having me on, Joey.
See you later. Bye. Hey guys, give Brendan Gentili a subscribe on YouTube and a follow on X. He produces a lot of good Bitcoin content, as well as just interviewing other Bitcoiners. So look out for him there. Cheers, guys.